Nintendo takes what many see to be a suicide dive into the video game console market with the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985. They shipped 50,000 units to select stores throughout New York City.
So it was an uphill fight to enter the market with the NES in 1985. Nintendo was not well known. In fact, in my case, I remember listening to newscasters or to meeting people who would mispronounce the word Nintendo. They just couldn't get it right.
But the system's unique appearance and strong lineup of games catches the public eye.
When I first saw the NES, I thought, like, wow, that's so futuristic looking. It comes with a robot. And it's got this lid that opens. It's like from the future. It's amazing. Coming off being a fan of Atari 800 or ColecoVision and television, you know, the Atari 2600, the NES was pretty spectacular as far as what it could do.
And a home version of Super Mario Bros. By Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Donkey Kong, makes the NES a must-buy for gamers.
Miyamoto is one of those rare people who brought something new to gaming. They're these shining figures, these shining stars of gaming who introduce a new gameplay concept.
So I'm looking for the $2 to $5 ColecoVision games, and all of a sudden I see Super Mario Brothers, which I had just become addicted to in the arcade. And it was like, Super Mario Brothers, wow. So I go around the corner to the other aisle, and there's the NES, and it's $80 with Super Mario Brothers. It's like, tick, okay, sold.
Yeah, Super Mario Brothers was, you know, it remains one of the best games ever made. It shows just how far ahead Nintendo was from everybody else.
For Mario, I mean, Mario was, of course, the first game to become a really huge hit all around the world and generate lots and lots of fans. And so that, of course, you know, I mean, Mario will always be close to me.
We didn't sell all 50,000, but it was enough of a success that Toys R Us and other retailers said, why don't you expand to a few other markets in 1986. But in early 1986, we made the decision that based upon the success of the NES in New York City, that we would expand and go nationwide. By the end of 1986, the thing just took off. Amazing.
And by Christmas of 87-88, there were millions of units sold worldwide. There were already a few games that had broken 1 million units. It was pretty obvious that the game industry was back, you know, alive and well.
The NES succeeded because it had kick-ass games. There was Metroid. Obviously later there was The Legend of Zelda.
By 1987, 5.4 million NES units are sold. Nintendo's lineup is also boosted by a number of third-party games.
We went out to a number of software companies, both in the United States and in Japan, and we were successful in bringing 4 or 5 on board. Data East, Capcom, Bandai.
To make sure the mistakes made by the game industry in the past aren't repeated, Nintendo devises a special system for developers who wish to make games for the NES.
A number of us studied the Atari debacle very closely, and one of the reasons they had not succeeded was they had not been able to maintain quality control over the software that was played on the hardware. But we wanted to make sure that if other people introduced games to the NES, they would introduce it under a licensing system that Nintendo would control, and that Nintendo would control the quality.
Third-party games that get approved for the NES are given the official Nintendo stamp of approval. But this same system will lead to some big legal battles. When 1988 rolls around, Nintendo's NES has an established base of 9.4 million units throughout the United States. The gray and black Japanese console is king of the hill. But that doesn't mean there isn't any competition.
The first legitimate competition was Sega.
The console wars started between Sega and Nintendo with the Sega Master System and the Nintendo Entertainment System. The thing was, brand loyalty ran so deep, for me at least as a child, that when I actually went to the department store and played a Sega Master System, I felt like I was cheating on my spouse. It was like I felt dirty and icky, so I ran home to my Nintendo and went back and played that instead.
The Sega Master System would go on to sell only 2 million units in its lifetime and capture just 11% of the gaming market. The biggest problems for Nintendo come from legal battles rather than competition. One of the most notable conflicts Nintendo faces is with Tengen.
You had to license your games from Nintendo, you had to pay Nintendo a fee to manufacture it, you had to let Nintendo manufacture the cartridges for it. Where Tengen, which was an offshoot of Atari, was making unlicensed games for the NES.
They concluded that they could go around the licensing system that we had in place and manufacture their own games for play on the Nintendo Entertainment System without the necessity of a license. And we got into litigation with them, but we were successful. Those lawsuits were all decided in Nintendo's favor.
Some game companies complain that Nintendo's control over third-party developers is too strict. But by 1990, Nintendo controls 80% of the gaming market. And if publishers wanted in, they had to play by Nintendo's rules.
Yeah, well, Nintendo had pretty, I would maybe call them aggressive business practices, and they would really restrict publishers to only bringing out like a couple games a year.
They had tremendous testing checklists that we had to go through, and they would test the game and be pretty nitpicky about some of the things that were in it.
Nintendo's strict policies lead to an investigation by the FTC, and the matter is eventually settled out of court. Later, the game company sues Camerica over its Game Genie cheating device, and this time, Nintendo loses.
The Game Genie was like your way of being the hacker. I can get in there and I can give myself infinite lives and I can warp all the way to the end. Nintendo didn't like it, obviously, because you could rent a game and beat it.
By 1991, games like Super Mario Bros. 3 and Shadowgate pushed the NES to its peak, giving Nintendo 90% of the U.S. video game market. From the official Nintendo Power magazine to Nintendo accessories, toys, and even cereal, the Nintendo invasion is complete.
It was this monthly magazine that was giving you tricks, that was giving you previews of other games coming out, and you felt like, you know what, I am a gamer now.
But eventually, the NES has to make way for newer, more powerful systems.
The NES eventually had to evolve into something more powerful. Sega came in with its Genesis, which was a 16-bit machine. All of a sudden, we're seeing more colors, livelier, more realistic animation, and a lot of different kind of games that you weren't able to play on the NES before.
Well, certainly technology was moving on finally, and we were on to the Super NES and 16-bit processors, and just another jump in graphics capabilities and gameplay. That was inevitable. Kind of started the cycle, I guess you see today, of technology and new systems coming out every few years.
As time goes by, game consoles steadily grow more and more powerful. But no matter what the future brings, the impact of the NES on the world of gaming will never be forgotten.
You look back and the NES was the system we all grew up with. It had all the great games, it established all these huge franchises.
The NES brought gaming back, and it made it very, very popular.